with the people that make those decisions and that can actually make that change. Unfortunately, right now, I don't have any more news on it than I had since I put our statement out, which obviously isn't just made public. It goes to the right people, and we follow up with phone calls. Deanna might be able to add a little bit more to that, but I don't know if she can.
Yeah, as regard to the vaccinations, we have been in constant contact with OPWDD. And one of the things that we were working with OPWDD to do is to give each of the counties a list of residential and day services providers in each county. So I know that they got that information over to the county around the end of last week. And the other thing that we have been working with OPWDD to do would be to set aside some vaccines for IDD communities. And that's a little bit more of a county by county basis and working with each county executive on setting aside some vaccines, maybe finding alternate sites so that individuals don't have to go to the huge drive-through mass vaccination sites. Those are some of the initiatives that Senator Mannion has been pushing with OPWDD. I think we've had, a little bit of success. We were told that, we were expecting some extra vaccines to come in for the IDD population from the federal government. At this time, it does not look like they materialized yet, but it's something that we are still in communications, and we're hoping that they will get more vaccines available to be left aside for this community.
Hi, this is Bruce Drake from Exceptional Family Resources. I'm sorry I'm off camera, but I'm traveling. Just so you know, from our perspective, we've been meeting with the county once a week. We're being told that they're getting 200 doses a week that they're supposed to set aside for folks from OPWDD, and the county and OPWDD and some of the local execs have been meeting once a week to come up with which agencies are going to have access to those vaccines at a given time. We were able to get 47 people vaccinated last week. It looks like we'll get another 50 this week. But just for us, we're talking about a universe of 1,000 people, and we're a relatively small organization.
Yeah, and I can add that Access CNY and a couple of other agencies, in addition to what Bruce just talked about at the county level, we're working with the regional equity task force for vaccines focused on individuals with disabilities. So our work group has been pushing to have a dedicated pod, point of distribution for people with disabilities, just because we know the hurdles that are involved with the large venues are not great venues for a lot of the individuals that we serve. So we've been really pushing to have an agency-based pod at one of the organizations where we could bring in a couple of hundred people in a day to get them vaccinated. I mean, preferably someday we want to be able to do a mobile distribution site so we can go to people. We're not at a point where we have the number of vaccines to do that, but we have put our pod request in to anyone who will listen, quite honestly, from the county to upstate, who was kind of controlling the doses for a while. And now we're working with a representative of the state who's working on the pod population. So this would allow us to really have control over who gets the vaccination and the registration process, which is our other big concern, I think, is that those 200 doses that Bruce referenced are great, but a lot of our population are eligible to go to any site to get vaccinated, but the registration process is just not one that's easy to navigate, quite frankly, for everyone. So we're not sure right now if it's a matter of, it's not that they're not willing, we think it's just a matter of the doses aren't there to do it, but we're going to keep pushing to make sure we can see if we can pull off a pod for people with disabilities.
Absolutely. And, I'm 100% supportive. The people in my office, know our position, and the position that we put out there is we have highlighted the exact reasons why this population, why there are challenges and why it makes so much sense. And, from a personal standpoint, those rationales as to why we need smaller settings or for those vaccines to come to you, resonate with me. The other thing I would say about it is that we know that the state as a whole is focused on making sure that this is an equitable risk distribution, and then also making sure that certain communities are, we have gone to them, but we are making the argument, this is absolutely a community that we need to go to make sure that the people that are most closely connected know how to prioritize these vaccinations and help with the process. So we're with you 100%. We'll keep pushing at the state, and we have good relationships, of course, with county leadership, and we'll make sure that what they can do, if they can do it, that we make it easy for them to get it done.
Well, a comment here. When it happened that individuals with intellectual developmental disabilities were allowed to register for the vaccine, that was along with 18 other comorbidities,
Right.
a long list. So it opened up to many more populations, but the vaccines weren't there. I would say that as a parent, like most people here, parents or advocates, you're on the computer, whatever it takes 24/7 to try to get that registration, and you feel like you won the lottery when you get through. And then it was on a Friday, I believe, our doctor, we contacted them through the portal on Monday morning at 8:15. They had the standard form that had been made available. I guess the county had agreed upon, maybe it's a statewide form, with the whole list of comorbidities checked and the signature by the doctor in our portal by like 8:15 on Monday morning. It was incredible. We were very grateful, but we know that we must be in a horribly small minority that have had this come together so quickly because of all the steps. And actually, we were working on it. My daughter was working on it, to make this happen. Most people can't do that.
Absolutely.
And other people who are, obese and asthma, were all thrown into the same mix. So it was a great idea, and we appreciate any advocacy, but it was thrown in with a lot of other issues, which just further compounded the access. And I think as a group, we believe that we got to continue to advocate for other ways to deliver it. And I think that was what part of the conversation. The agencies really are in a good position to recruit, help people with paperwork, and assign a certain allotment of vaccines. They'll get them delivered. But 47, when you have a population of 1,000, let's do the math. That's going to take how many weeks to get that done? So it's just not going as well as it could and should. We appreciate the effort. I know Albany. Someone said earlier on the call that Albany's busy, and we all know Albany right now is totally upside down with issues at the administrative level. No one knows what's going to come with this federal money, how this federal money is going to get doled out. Is it ever going to make it to the agencies, or is it going to pay other bills? And it's all going to take time. And that's really where the frustration continues to build in. The pandemic has been bad enough, but the uncertainties surrounding the funding and the availability of vaccines and everything is just it puts people. I mean, really, people are on the edge if they're not already over the edge. And
this group should have been prioritized from day one. And again, the win, as you say, was more like an 18-way tie. So it really wasn't too much of a win. But they should have been prioritized from the beginning. And I think, Deanna and I know what the next step is here. We've already been pushing for it. But the next step is to try to make an ease of access here, and so that we can truly get the vaccinations done. So we hear you.
Senator, you mentioned concerns about the budget, which is, will be hopefully passed on its April 1st deadline. What are your biggest concerns with the current budget as it stands?
Well, I have three. I'm going to limit it to three, but we got more than three, right? And I'm part of the health work group, which means we've seen the executive budget. We've highlighted the concerns as it relates to this population. Where are we going to push back? We're advocating within that group so that these things get prioritized. The first thing is the 1% across the board cuts. We have seen over the course of too long of a period of time that these programs are underfunded, and it puts great stress on recruitment and retainment of staff. And then also, running the organizations to the point where many of them have been good partners and been smart about how to manage things for a long period of time. But these reimbursement rates are unsustainable. So we've got to push back on that. That's one. Number two, I think I have the timeline right, but we're looking at 10 years since any type of genuine cost of living adjustment. That is something we already have pushback on, and we will continue to push back on. And then the third thing, which was already mentioned, which is that we have to make sure that when these federal dollars come in, that they're dedicated to OPWDD, that they're dedicated to that, and they can be quickly distributed to the organizations to provide the services that need it. That's one other thing. There's other elements of this budget for sure that we can make better. We definitely have to value the people who are providing the direct service by paying them a decent wage, as I referenced before. I hope we can make some adjustments in this budget, but we need a long-term goal when it comes to that, and a realistic goal, because this just isn't realistic. So those are the big things. Those are the big things for me. We have other issues outside of the budget, but if I had to keep it to three, those would be my three.
And are those in the order of importance in your mind?
I'm trying to go back. They're all important. We have documentation where we prioritize, and as I remember, that is the order that they are prioritized. Those are our top three priorities. But I'm anxious to hear other things. If there's changes that you would suggest to those priorities or others. Obviously. The organizations have taken on tremendous costs over a period of time, and the percentage that was withheld has to be released, so that's another one. If we're talking about the people that have provided these services, that have gone above and beyond, that have spun on a dime to make sure that, as Joe had mentioned, this is a challenging for many of us. It's even more challenging for people who already have their challenges, or in isolation or isolated settings. They need this. So the people that have provided those services, I've advocated that they receive hazard pay, and that those federal dollars that come in, make sure that we, one, use that money to release all the funds that have been held back by the state, and number two, to provide additional hazard reimbursements for those groups.
I'll just make a further comment on this. Forget number one and number two. Number three is where the focus is. One and two could be benefit from the strongest effort on the number three, in terms of getting the money that's entitled or supposed to be coming here in the right hands. It's an attitude of, we have a cost of living adjustment, and we're having to figure out different ways to live in this, and we hope to pay the people. No, there's trillions of dollars in the system coming in. New York State's going to get a healthy bunch of this dough, and I think I would just recommend that everybody, the focus could be singular, in that get us at least the money that we are entitled to, and the organizations can figure it out from there. It's not to get leftovers. It's to really focus on getting us the money that we're entitled to, and who knows the other multitude of pockets that it's going to go into. Maybe our stronger advocates or it's always been that way. But I think if we're going to focus on an area of advocacy, it's on number three exclusively.
I hear you.
Yeah, that's a great point, Joe. I think in in broad terms, the numbers I've heard is that something like $700 million has come to the state through the enhanced FMAP rate for Medicaid services for people with disabilities. And I can tell you that 0 of those dollars have made its way to provider organizations. And on the flip side, I think statewide providers have incurred an additional $500 million in COVID-related expenses. So, and those agencies have absorbed those costs. So I think that you're right that item number 3 is a big one that would help fix 1 and 2. And Sarah, I'm glad to hear you mention the withhold. We're starting to hear good news about the withhold. We've heard today that there are some counties across the state who have notified their providers that they will be reimbursing the 20% that has been withheld in the past, and that they will be moving forward with a 5% going forward. We haven't heard anything from OPD on that, but it was uplifting to hear that some counties are making that change already. So
that's encouraging.
One of the things that this group is working, the leadership group tomorrow, is actually meeting to talk about sort of what we want to focus on from an advocacy standpoint. So Joe, the timing of your comment is quite good. So I think that's something we can definitely work on. Senator, any thoughts on who we should be, for something like that, who we should be advocating with in addition to folks in your office?
Do you mean at the state level, are you referring to?
Yeah, for the additional funding that could come through the feds to the state.
Sure. Well, this is why we can talk about the budget and advocating for that. We have problems in the executive budget that we have to fix, So not to answer your question, but when we're advocating for a free flow of dollars to come from the federal government, make sure they get to the organizations that's necessary, absolutely, that's true. And we're pushing for statutory language to make sure that we do that, that happens. But there's other parts of the budget that have to be fixed for sure. I will say that I would communicate with OPWDD and make sure, that if those dollars are coming through the Department of Health, I think those are the places at the state that you need to be heard. And Deanna may have another comment on that, on who best to communicate with, who best to, advocate through. I will say that, I'm one representative of the area. There's other representatives. If you do communicate with anybody at the Department of Budget or somebody from the governor's office, that you can aggressively advocate and say, we need, we're hurting, we need to make sure these dollars come in. Communicating with leadership in the Senate or the Assembly is also helpful, and I do think that they're going to hear it from organizations around the state that represent this community.
Deanna, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, Senator Mannion's been in contact with Council and Finance on the Senate side. We're also working in partnership with some of the legislators in the Assembly, like Assemblywoman Gunther and Assemblymember Avenanti, to make sure we're coming from a unified front to represent the disabilities community and make sure that is being communicated to the health chair, to the majority leader and the speaker, and things like that. So we really need to work together in order to make sure that everyone understands how important these budget asks are.
And our timeline is pretty short right now, correct, given the April 1st deadline for the budget?
Yes, that's correct. And we have our one house budget proposals. They typically come out the second week of March. There's no exact statutory date on that, but we are working up to those one house budget proposals, and Senator Mannion speaks up on this issue amongst his colleagues on the regular.
Senator Mannion, this is Bruce Drake again. If I could just say one more thing about the withhold. I know we're addressing it, how it's impacting us now, but just as a general practice going forward from an organizational standpoint, a withhold is almost impossible to manage. You know, a cut is a cut, and nobody wants a cut, but you could always do things to reduce your expenses, or you can try and do things. A withhold, if you spend $1, you get 80 cents back. If I decide that I'm only going to spend 80 cents, then I only get 64 cents back. It's an impossible situation to put organizations in. And to the degree going forward, if you're ever in a room where these things are discussed again, withholds tie the hands of management and take away all flexibility in how to run our organizations, because there's just no way to catch up. It's either, I felt like we were put in a position where we either had to tell the families we're no longer to support you in these services, or we had to eat the money ourselves. And I think a lot of organizations feel that way. So I'm certainly not advocating for cuts, but if I was in a position where you told me I was getting 5% less money, then I can manage that. If you're telling me in a position in order to get 95 cents, I have to spend $1, that's really difficult to manage.
Well, I 100% agree. And, you know, just like school districts have to plan a budget, this is putting organizations in an impossible position. And, you know, that authority was passed around before I got in here, and I've advocated to make sure that that doesn't happen moving forward. And again, not to get into the politics of all that, but I've been pretty vocal about that. So I 100% agree with you. You know, we've gone through an awful time, and there were tough budget decisions to occur, but you can't go through a budgetary year with the expectation that you may not be reimbursed to the level that you need to be. You can't plan. So I 100% agree with you. And I will let you know that, you know, there's a lot of consensus, of course, that we can't do this. This can't happen again. There's no way organizations can plan appropriately and provide the services if we play by this set of rules.
Thank you.
Matt, if it's okay, I just want to mention a couple of things that the senator's probably heard from me before on, and we'll hear again tomorrow afternoon when we talk. But yeah, the transparency, the lack of transparency between OPWD and the provider community, as well as the families, is at an all-time low. And we've talked about the fact that OPWD is statutorily required to produce a comprehensive plan, the 507 plan, to communicate to the community at large what their strategy is going forward with how services may change, what their focus is going to be. And OPWD is the only agency in the state that doesn't have a current plan. So I know you've already advocated on that issue, and thank you for that. And that remains a priority for, again, families and providers. And then the second thing I want to mention is that the residential cuts that OPWD first announced last summer, again, without any communication to families or providers, and has since delayed until May 1st, really puts families and providers at odds. In that, in the past, when someone who we serve residentially wanted to go home for a weekend or want to go on vacation with their family, providers were not negatively impacted by that. But now we will be, and that really puts us at odds with family, and that's not a situation that we at all want to be in. Again, I know you're aware of these issues, but they are especially sensitive for families.
Sure.
So I wanted to mention them here.
In being new to the role, you know, we've asked the commissioner for that plan, and I think the response, if I remember correctly, is by the end of the year. You know, but we followed up, and you know, again, that needs to happen much sooner than that. On the other side of this, you know, the commissioner would like to take a position that, you know, one of two evils, the lesser of two evils, had to be picked, right? As far as cuts were coming. Okay, we get that. But, you know, residential facilities have to keep the lights on. They certainly can't give up that vacancy to someone in the short term. It's just, it's not sustainable like other things. We've got to get a fix on that. I think I understand that issue very well, and I will advocate that you know, we have to delay that change at a minimum, but we really can't have it because we're not going to be able to serve the families, like you said, if We want people going out for care. We want people going and engaging with their families. And if you're going to punish organizations when they do that, it's destructive, really is. So we will push back on that.
We appreciate that. What other questions do folks have for the senator?
I don't think it's, this is Drew Nordmark. I'm not gonna, this isn't a question, it's more of a comment and a continuation of what Paul just shared with you. My son lives in a group home, and I think it at the very least too, it makes it very dehumanizing. And why is his life worth less than yours or mine? If we still have to pay our bills if we go on vacation, right? Why is it not right for him to come home? And I feel, my family feels very blessed that the organization he lives in has never made us or him feel less than. But how long is this sustainable? And again, it's, I know it all comes down to money, but these are people's lives. So I just wanted to share that.
I'm right there with you. I've been here, I've been in this role for 7 weeks, and we had to hit the ground running, and we did. And this vacation issue, or these vacancies, that issue makes no sense. It's not logical. It lacks dignity, like you said. And I'm 100% with you.
Thank you. Yep. Yes, rushing in here. Yes, and my son lives in a large group home, which I know too is an anomaly with the ways oftentimes they look at people and lives and families. But I mean, just seriously, our involvement with Access and L'Arche and everyone, they've never made us or our son feel less than. But my heart aches every day thinking, but I feel blessed that I don't think, oh, I really shouldn't have Ian home Monday night because, blah, blah, blah. That I shouldn't even have to think that way, right? So I just felt compelled to share that.
Absolutely. And like I said, my aunt was in residential facilities. I saw the good and the bad of that, and never had to see it from, of course, the administrative side. Right. But to have a policy in place that is so illogical, because for all intents and purposes, I know we'll refer to it as a bed. That bed is filled. It's not vacant. It's not vacant. Can't be replaced. And we want to make sure that people who are living in those residential facilities are engaging outside of that facility in meaningful and enriching experiences. And if we have a tug of war at that, it's illogical, it makes sense, and I'm 100% in agreement with you.
And I think that what you just said made me think it even goes even deeper, because if you keep setting these precedents and have people start thinking with this mentality, again, very blessed that no one that works with our son looks at him as a dollar sign. He's a human being to his soul. But you start to get a mindset that, well, we have to do this. We have to fill the bed. We have to do this. We have to, and that just starts the hamster wheel going. And again, it's not a good thing.
No.
And again, just to add to that, Drew, and to be clear, Access CNY has not we have not gone there either. We want to make sure that when someone lives in one of our homes, if they want to go home, they absolutely, that is their right, that's their choice. But another aspect of these cuts that is a potential impact of the system is agencies may need to look at their residential portfolio in total and say, okay, if we in the past, if we've experienced a 3% vacancy rate because of, God forbid someone dies, then we may say, okay, we need to reduce our capacity by 3% or even by 5% to make sure that we're not impacted by these cuts as much. And that's the last thing we want to happen also is to remove beds from the system as a reaction to these types of cuts. So there's a lot of different possible reactions to the cuts, none of which are good.
No, you shouldn't, families and organizations shouldn't have to make these decisions. This should not be a policy. It shouldn't be, period. Because it is, as per Drew's word, using her word, it takes dignity away from the individual, 100%.
Any other questions for the senator?
I guess I would just like to make a comment. I'm the parent of a person living with disabilities, and I can't tell you how grateful I am that she's getting vaccinated at the end of this week. And I have noticed a difference since you've been in office. I saw you on the TV talking about this, and I was so impressed that this issue was out there and that we have an advocate like you.
That's nice of you. I appreciate that, Mary. You know, it's everybody pushing together, because I know the community. I know that there's strong advocates. I know that there's great leaders in the organizations. But unfortunately, what we've seen over the course of many years is just a lack of valuing this population, and it's lack of valuing them from a financial standpoint. So, you know, we're doing our best on within the budget process to highlight how bad these things are, and that it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable in a number of different ways. Thank you. It's nice of you.
Welcome.
Anything else anyone wants to add? Deanna or Senator Mannion, any last words from you?
Well, I will say that, you know, there's other things that we have to fix outside of this too, outside of just the budget. There's problems out there, and you know, Paul and I have spoken about making sure that especially local organizations that have these close connections, and to your point, Drew, you mentioned the good experience that you've had. We've got people caring for our family members, and we've got to make sure that we empower and value the organizations that have the people that know the people that are being served very well, because it's, when it's a good experience, it's a great experience, and that's your family member. I've seen it myself. When it's not a good experience, it should be all-consuming, and it is. So, you know, from another side of it, we want to make sure that our local organizations that have these close connections, you know, are supported. I think people on this call who lead these organizations know that I'll advocate for that. And the bottom line is we have to value this community, and it's really insulting at the numbers that are on sheets of paper over the course of multiple years here, and how the state funds this, that it's just anybody who can do simple math knows it's wrong and it's unsustainable. So we've got to get it right. And, you know, I'm here to help push with everybody else to make sure that we get those changes, and, you know, we get people vaccinated. My takeaways are we keep pushing on the budgetary things. We've got some other things to take care of too outside of that, but we also have to get the vaccinations to these folks, and that's the easiest way. We cannot expect everybody who is an individual with a disability or their families to navigate the system. There's tremendous risks and other issues related to some of the challenges that they already face. So that's my other takeaway from this, and we will promise to make it a priority.
We appreciate that. And I will circle back with Deanna and share this group's letter that was sent to the county regarding prioritizing and how to get vaccines to people with disabilities in an accessible way. So I think we can share that and our communication about the pod, just so you're in the loop on what this group is doing and the actions we're hoping to take to get people with disabilities vaccinated.
Fantastic. Thank you. That'll be helpful.
We appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Keep fighting.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Hey, everybody's still here. How's everybody good with how our meeting went?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he you know, he really sounds like he will advocate, you know, for the people with disabilities. So I was very impressed. I've, you know, not seen him before and I've never met him. So thank you for organizing it.
Yeah, I mean, Paul can speak to this just as well as I can, because I think, Paul, you're in communication with him multiple times a week. It feels like right now regarding everything from, you know, program issues that we're having, particular to Access CNY, but on other issues as well. So he was really out front right at the outset. And the committee that he's leading is a brand new committee within the state Senate. So there was never an IDD committee. And sort of the inside
New
politics.
eyes.
What's that?
So it's not the same old, same old. Someone's coming at this with new eyes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and we think, and this is going to be a little more political, but he is in a seat, was elected to a seat that has been a Republican seat for many, many, many years through John DeFrancisco, you know, was in that seat for decades. And, you know, the sense is they want him to be reelected over and over again. So I think they've given him a little heavier lift than they would maybe give a freshman senator. And that gives us some opportunity to work with him and push him on issues, because I think he's got a little more leverage with leadership than a freshman senator normally would.
I know I
Yeah.
missed the beginning and I see it was recorded, so I will go and listen, but I'm hoping that, did you also touch on raising pay for people who work with our individuals, or?
Yeah, he highlighted three
Oh,
main
yeah,
items.
okay.
That
I
were
had
not-
faith.
that was one of them, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and Drew, just to explain the committee a little bit more. So previously there was a committee that was combined mental health and developmental disabilities committee. And so there was a conduit through that committee to address issues, but it's already been much more productive to have a committee that's focused only on DD issues.
Yes, I remember from a decade ago, that was very difficult to sit on that committee where it's all mixed together.
Yeah, and
Because you
now
want to work together, but
yeah, and now is, you know, there's a lot of meetings going on right now. So tomorrow afternoon, I'm part of the NIDA group, the New York Disability Advocates, which is all 7 provider associations we're going through our legislative meetings and meetings with committee chairs such as the senator and others, and we'll be speaking with him again tomorrow afternoon. And DSP wages will be at the top of the list in that conversation as well. So
okay,
he's hearing a lot of the same themes multiple times over the next couple of weeks.
great. Can I ask a question, snowballing on that, but I don't want to monopolize, so you can answer this later if you want. Now that they're separating groups again, I know that also can create other problems because there are so many people with developmental disabilities that have mental health issues. I mean, are we starting that whirlwind over again too, or do you think it's going to work better this way?
It's a great question. I do think it's going to work better this way. I think it's really incumbent on the providers to make sure that people who have dual diagnoses receive the support they need, and I think this is a better situation as far as that goes, because there are still ways for committees to collaborate and develop new programs or new demonstration projects, that type of thing, to address those situations.
Okay, thank you.
Any other last minute thoughts or questions? So as I mentioned, the leadership group and Dave and I are meeting tomorrow. So we'll see a few of you then, just to talk about how we want to prioritize our advocacy, run meetings, and all that jazz. So we'll have more to report back to the group at the March meeting. Deb, anything you want to add?
No, I mean, I think, you know, we just have to get ourselves up and running and really figure out what our priorities are for this year, and then how do we tackle them. I mean, there's so many things, but, you know, I really think that we have to pick, you know, maybe 3 things and, you know, really put our focus into that, and, you know, certainly come back to the bigger group after we've all met and share it with them.
Yeah, and
but, you know,
we did recently connect Deb with the other leadership of the other statewide organizations. So I think that could help us as well once I had a hard time following that thread, Deb, that you and I were both in.
Yeah, and I haven't, to be honest, I have not reached out to anybody yet. It's just
Yes,
their busy time at work. So we'll talk about that tomorrow too.
Yep, that sounds good. Yeah, we can figure out having one of them make a guest appearance at one of our organizational meetings and figure out strategy and how to format ourselves. So
because
perfect.
it's, it can be just thinking of all the priorities. I mean, it can be overwhelming. So, I want this group to be, successful. I think we all do.
Yep.
So
all right,
more to come. All right.
Everybody
Have a good night. Take care. Bye.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.